feature presentation.
Welcome to the 8th best movie podcast in Canada. The hierarchy of the Untitled movie podcast is about to change. Episode 135. I'm Matt Rohrbeck alongside. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved. Eric Marchin.
Matt, I'm ready to bring the lightning and thunder to this one.
Yep. Today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. You probably already know from the title. Eric and I attended. You might have saw some of our social media posts about going to the hashtag Black Adam Rocks Canada event. Did I use the wrong hashtag in a lot of my posts, thinking it was Black Adam Rocks Toronto? I did.
More specific.
It was a little bit more specific, but we did go to the Black Adam event in Toronto, which we will be talking about. Our review for Black Adam, spoiler free, should be out soon, 5:30 p.m. today. If you're listening to this right away, I highly doubt you are. If you are, thank you. So if not, the Black Adam review is probably out. So go check that out over on Untitled Movie Reviews. On today's episode, we'll be talking about our experience attending that event at the Rec Room, or as Eric more aptly called it, the Rock Room, as
Should
well
have changed
as
the name.
our experience seeing the man, the myth, the legend, Dwayne The Rock Johnson in person, as
Dwayne!
well as we'll talk about what we've been watching. We'll talk about the Creed 3 trailer. We'll talk about Harrison Ford is joining the MCU in Captain America NWO New World Order and more. So Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. I mean, the one thing we didn't talk about in our review is the shout out to Diamond Dallas Page.
Oh
There
yeah.
with the
We'll talk about that on the spoiler cast maybe
yeah.
or today. Yeah, we're going to do a spoiler cast for Black Adam. So the review we have up right now is completely spoiler free. We won't really talk about our thoughts of the movie here because technically this will probably go out before the embargo's up, but you can check out our social media reactions as well.
Yeah, and you can just wait for our review. We say it all there. It's there because we care. Were we rocked by the event itself, or was it a little rocky? Maybe it was a little bit of both.
Do you want to just get right into it? Yeah. So
Yeah,
on last Thursday, correct? Yeah, we
you'd be
went
correct.
to the let me put in a time code here. We got to that pretty quickly. I'm surprised. Um we got invited to attend the Black Adam Rocks Canada event. So basically what it was is The Rock is doing this world tour for Black Adam because he is a producer on the film. He's been trying to do this project for 15 years now. He shared an article from Peter Sciretta on Slash Film that was 15 years ago, where they said The Rock is going to be playing Black Adam, and the movie's finally coming out. So he's on this world tour where it started, I think, in Mexico. He went to the world premiere in New York, and then he came to Toronto, and then he's going to a bunch of different places to kind of promote Black Adam. So really going all out. So the Toronto event, he was going to come to the Rec Room, which is a Cineplex owned venue by the Sky Dome or the Rogers Center here in Toronto that has arcade games. It's a restaurant, it's a bar, and things like that. So he was going to appear here at this event. And there was going to be different things there, as well as there was going to be a march to the theater with everyone who attended the event, and then there would be screenings at Scotiabank for Black Adam, which is one of the screenings Eric and I attended in IMAX. We have our cool lenticular tickets that they gave us that you can see on the video version. We just showed them off. And yeah, so I don't know where you want to start, but Eric and I got there. We had a screening earlier that morning.
For James Gray's Armageddon Time.
Yeah, which we no embargo on that. We can talk about
Yeah.
too, right? But we'll put that review out soon. But then we had a whole hell of a lot of time to kill. So we got lunch, we walked around, we hung out in the Starbucks, and then we got to the event around 4 o'clock because the doors were opening at 4:15. So we got inside and jump in at any point, Eric, but like a pretty standard, one of those influencer, movie party kind of setups, posters everywhere, past food Although still at this time, like, I know I'm one of those people that is getting more comfortable without a mask. Like, I still will wear my mask a lot depending on the situation and depending on how comfortable I feel. Um, Past foods, still an event with that many people, I'm still not about. Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I was very hungry even because we did eat in the right after our first screening, but I wasn't. I don't know. It's still something about everyone without their masks and breathing on that food that I was just like, I can't do that yet. Like a smaller event where it's like, only 20, 30 people we've been at, and I have had food just because I feel a little bit more comfortable. But um, they had a small stage set up. They had Black Adam trailers on loop. They had the loudest music I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know if I'm getting older and I just not used to it anymore, but like playing the most random music ever on
Papa
top of that.
Roach.
Like,
My
and then
heart rate went up several times during this event, and my watch was telling me that it was at 120 beats
something, yeah.
per second or what have you. And
Eric got a high heart rate warning, which on an Apple Watch, if you've been standing or sitting in one place and not moving, but your heart rate is over 120 beats per minute, it warns you,
yeah,
like going, why is your heart rate so high? And my heart rate was, I think, teetering on that because I kept looking at mine and the music was so loud I could feel it
yeah,
in my chest. Um, so that being said, the event was, they had some games that they were playing with this
rock paper
host,
scissors.
which was rock, paper, scissors, where people were winning prizes, whether it was like a trip to LA was the grand prize, and a lifetime supply of Zoa energy drink. um, and then they had different prizes like tickets to Raptors games and Leaf games and things like that.
And Night
So
at the Shangri-La Hotel. And
yeah, so a host from, I think he was from like some sort of the Raptors kind of thing. And I might put B-roll over this footage that because I actually have some, so you might be seeing The Rock on stage as we're talking right now or throughout this segment. But yeah, they had a small stage. The crowd was large but not insane. Like
but it
it
was still
was
kind of it was still kind of packed, especially when you had The Rock coming to the stage where there was that kind of cluster of people all put together, and you could kind of feel like, when it gets warmer, the sweat
mhm.
trickling down your back, and people were shouting and engaged. There was one person in the very back that was shouting to get The Rock's attention as he was leaving the stage.
I was a
Um,
kid, yeah.
yeah, and so with some of that, like, Matt and I kind of avoid a lot of, like, Q&As and kind of moments where we feel that there will be
Celebrity events and stuff
some
like that.
cringe-worthy stuff. But at the same time, we realize that it's also good to kind of show face and kind of be a part of certain things, and having the opportunity to see the movie a little bit earlier and review the film and also talk about the event, is a nice
And I've admired
bonus.
The Rock for a long time, so I did want to see the guy in person. And like,
Yeah.
I was curious of how that was going to go. And I think for the most part, like I didn't have, other than that kid screaming at the end, Rock, I got a sign, Rock, I got a sign, was a little much. But like I think his engagement with the crowd, and he is a people person, right? He is the people's champ. And like we brought that up on our review. And you can kind of see that in how he engages with people, like how he talks to people, how he engages with his fans, how people really treat him as like this icon. And he really is. We said it, like one of the few people that I think is like a movie star. And that's not saying he's the best actor in the world or anything like that, but he is a presence. He feels larger than life. Like, and he is a large man when you see him in person. And seems very genuine, and seems like he does, like he's both playing to the company and playing to the products he's pitching, and the movie included in that. But he does, I never feel like it's completely phony with The Rock. Like I do feel like there is it is genuine to an extent, even though he is ultimately trying to get you to buy his tequila or buy his energy drink or go see Black Adam and things like that. Like he is selling himself. But he's always seemed like, in the people I know who have interviewed him or talked to him, like he's just very good. And that goes back to his WWE days of just like being a company man or being a very good talker and a very good conversationalist and things like that, where he can make each interviewer feel like, they're having this, one-on-one
That
kind
they're the
of
only person in the
yeah,
room.
exactly. And even when you saw him bring people up on stage and talk to those two winners that won that trip to LA and the lifetime supply of Zoa energy drink, and as well as like people in the crowd where he saw people's signs and took selfies and took their gifts that they brought him and things like that. Like you could tell, like not very many people, and he's going on this world tour for one, so he kind of has to put on that persona. But um I don't know, like it was still cool to see him in person, which is what this event was. Like there wasn't much else to it. Like there was a step and repeat Eric and I got a photo of. There were some posters and stuff like that. And but for the most part it was that stage, it was people waiting to see The Rock, right? So like it was funny, like when they were like, okay, we're done with the games now, The Rock's going to be the next person I introduce, and everyone's like, oh, it's going to be soon. We waited there as more and more people crowded that stage for a good 40 minutes, it felt like, or more. So the anticipation kept building, and it was funny, like hearing the loudest music I've ever heard in my life that made Eric almost have a heart attack. Um,
God.
um, it kept. Was sweating. I had to take off my jacket. I really had to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, I know the minute I go to the bathroom, he's gonna walk out. So I'm like, I just held it. But I also started to get more uncomfortable because there was more people. It started getting hot. It was taking longer. And then when he came out, The Rock did his thing, and it was cool to see him in person. But it was a quick, what, 10 minutes on stage, 15 minutes on stage, maybe, just like a very standard kind of like, can't wait for you guys to see the movie, this is what it is. Like people are going to be surprised by it, it's a superhero like you've never seen before, and things like that. And he did his little kind of PR thing, right, which is totally fine. But I think his interactions with people in the crowd, and he brought up a young woman who had one of it, like a quote that he did on that inspired her, like tattooed on her and stuff. And there were like some of that stuff is awkward because the person, I'm sure you're so starstruck and you're on stage and you don't know how to interact with people. So like, but it felt genuine, and like it was still cool to be there. But like other than that, there's not a ton to talk about of the event. There was a drum line performance. There was what else am I missing, Eric? But that was pretty much the extent of it, right?
Yeah, it kind of felt like, it was something that was put together to, have The Rock there, and when he got there, he did, like, it's basically like that, the equivalent of a waiting room scenario where, you're waiting to see the doctor and you spend more time in the waiting room
Dr.
than you
Fate.
do in the doctor's office. Yes, in this case, Dr. Fate would be a very apt choice. And then once you finally get into the, after spending, obviously we didn't spend 8 hours there, but like that feeling of spending 8 hours in an emergency room and then spending all of maybe 10 minutes with the doctor and then leaving and kind of being like, oh man, like that, like the, the actual visit was shorter than the wait. And that's kind of what this was, where, you're spending all this time. It's more comfortable than a waiting room, obviously, and there's more going on. um but you just kind of feel like, you're overwhelmed a little bit. You mentioned with the mask thing as well, but also just like with how many people are kind of in such a close proximity, and how warm it was in there as well. And you know I had a Diet Coke, so a DC,
I had a water.
and so with that, it kind of
Mm.
like helped kind of like keep me kind of going, because I'd been up since 5 that morning. So
It was a long ass day for
it
sure.
was
So
it
like that
was
wait, that last wait, that 40-minute wait where it kept getting a little warmer and waiting for The Rock, you were like, all right, this guy needs to come out here. But I think, like, again, seeing how passionate some of the fans were, there were a couple people dressed up as Black Adam and they went all out. So some cosplayers, which you always see at these kind of superhero events, but it's more for them. And it seemed like people, like those people who were right up at the front of the stage, who probably got there hella early, if they were fans, not critics or press. um they definitely, I think, got their money's worth engaging with The Rock. He was right there. Like it wasn't like this giant stage far down the thing. Like it was this tiny little stage, as you guys can see in the footage. But it was just cool being 10 feet from the guy. And I'm not really someone, and you, Eric, as well, that like celebrity does anything to us, right? Like we're pretty professional. Like we love having a conversation with someone, but I'm not one to get a selfie or an autograph or anything like that. But it was just cool uh to be there. And then we headed over to the theater after that, and they had this march where they used the drumming the drum line to kind of lead everyone to the theater. And I've seen some of the photos of the people at the front, and we were kind of at the very back of that group. Just kind of, we just were like, well, we might as well walk to the theater now. So we walked to the theater with this mini parade, which I just thought was kind of funny because they didn't shut down the streets or anything. So we had to wait at stoplights and we had to like do other things like that. So it was basically just everyone walking together to the theater. And you had some people interact with us both in being facetious or an asshole, or just being genuine, going, what's going on, and things like that. But um, we
Oh,
get to
even
the
even in the march as well, you had people, shouting to police officers, at the corners, being like, you guys don't get enough credit, blah blah
Yeah, there was
blah. And
one
it's just
weird. There
like,
was one guy behind us, which is that's another thing. We'll get to the theater experience after this, but you're always gonna have, when you put a bunch of strangers in a room, man, which is what the movies are. Is like you're always bound to get a microcosm of what society is, the
yeah,
Justice Society. So, and that guy really loved justice, that's for sure.
sure did.
Um,
A regular Hawkman.
and then we get to the theater. We didn't have our tickets. There was a little bit of a snafu there, but we eventually got our collectible lenticular IMAX ticket, which is pretty
Cherish this
cool.
always.
I will admit that this thing is like, for someone who likes attention to detail and going like above and beyond on your event or your um, design or your branding. Like I do appreciate a lenticular embossed IMAX ticket. I do really like that. So that was cool. But we got our tickets, and then we go, oh, okay, cool. The movie's gonna start at 7. Because we walked over and we got there around 6:30. Um, they're like, oh no, it's starting at 8. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. My phone's at 20% at this point. But we go get our IMAX seats. I'm glad we're in the IMAX theater. Something we didn't talk about on a review. There's no IMAX footage or shifting aspect ratios or anything in the IMAX version. It's just a straight up, like, I think 239 movie, but it's just in IMAX.
Yeah, because they also
Um,
had another screening in the
in
AVX
AVX,
theater.
yeah.
So
So we sit down. Eric, jump in at any point, but
no, I'm digging you telling the story. I'll jump in when we get to the moment of
yeah.
truth.
So we get our seats, which we talk about a lot on these shows. Like Eric and I are aisle seat guys. Me specifically, I both from a claustrophobic sense, and I just have to go to the bath. I drink so much liquid
Small
that like
bladder.
it's both a small bladder, and I just constantly have that full of just diet or Coke Zero and coffee and water. So I get aisles because I hate bothering people. Like I hate it. I don't want to be bothered in a movie. And I don't mind if people, like, if I have an aisle seat, if people get up, I don't care because I understand better than anyone. But I also don't like being in the middle because I feel trapped and I don't want to bother people when I come in and out of a movie. So I always like getting an aisle seat.
And you like to
Uh,
cross your leg. I think that's nice as
and
well.
stick my leg out. Yeah. And I that's definitely a bonus. So that being said, when you take an aisle seat intentionally, you sometimes, I feel like we always talk about how we get stuck beside certain people, like bad moviegoers, I'll just call them. And I think that happens a lot because we take the aisle seat. So a lot of the times the people who really give a shit get there early so they can sit in the dead center of the movie, because that's
We
where
were in
people,
row H, the
yeah. So
hierarchy of the IMAX theater.
yeah. And we get there and the theater's filling up because everyone walked over, and everyone, they should have started this movie at least at 7:30, because we were just waiting there forever. And we get there, and these two guys that look like they're straight out of I don't know, like
Well, Zack Snyder movie.
yeah, like they're just very
Or
broy
Michael
looking
Bay.
dudes. And I'm not trying to profile them or anything. They just look like they're like handsome dudes with tattoos that you could tell that they were just, full of themselves and just didn't give a shit about anyone but themselves and wanted to be the center of attention. So they come in which sometimes you get at these influencer events a lot, right? Like you're going to get those people. They're not the schlubby critics like us that just want to sit there and fucking watch the movie. So these two guys walk in and the theater's getting pretty full, and they pass us, and one guy's already being weird when he passes us, doing like a little dance in front of us, and I'm like, Go away, like what are
Well,
you
you didn't
doing?"
even mention, so the hockey game was that night as well, and
Yeah,
so when they first got there, they were being disruptive. But again, like it's like okay,
but they
it's
must have
before.
just been drinking at the Black Adam event at Rec Room, right?
Yeah, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, once the movie begins, they'll kind of quiet down and watch the movie, and then one of the guys is like, "Oh, my buddy here, like always talks through the film,"
Well,
and he's
that
kind of talking to. So
a
we had a
group like
buffer.
everyone, like I
Well,
don't
we had a
know.
bit of a buffer. So sitting next to me was
There
a
was no one yet
couple.
though. When
No,
they
no, no,
came
no, no.
in,
But
when
no,
they
they
came
were talking to who, I guess, whoever. But like they were kind of like almost looking. So I'm doing this on the visual aspect of YouTube. So they were looking up at the next row
behind us, yeah.
behind us, and they're kind of, he was just kind of like, I think, trying to see whoever would give him attention.
And that's the exact thing. And then he kept telling the person being like, "You can't save a buffer seat. You got to move over one. We need 2 seats." That so immediately he's already talking rudely to someone in the theater going, "You got to move over cuz I need 2 seats." So and like this person I'd be like, "Fuck you. This is where I want to sit. Go find somewhere else to sit." I can already tell that you're going to be annoying.
Yeah.
And like thank God she did move over, because like if not, then they probably would have sat beside us because there was 2 seats, or at least only 1 seat over. But continue. You said that then a couple comes in.
Yeah, so then a couple comes in, and they're kind of like uh the buffer zone
The 2
between.
seat buffer, yeah.
Yeah, so they sit down and they're minding their own business and talking and what have you before the
These
movie
guys get up
begins.
and leave the
They
theater
Yeah, they're like, you know what, let's go get some drinks and watch the game before
at the
we watch the
bar.
movie. And then they get up and go, and when they left, Matt, you kind of nailed it. You're like, oh god, they're gonna come back and be belligerent drunks.
And I said they'll come back 20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah,
I'm
and so
like,
so literally the
an
movie
hour go, an hour and a half passes.
the movie begins. We're watching the
They're not
film.
there.
They're not. Oh, and it was also extremely hot in this
Oh
theater.
God, yeah, it was a Godzilla experience all over again. It was just like it was so warm in the theater. Not Godzilla level, if anyone's heard that story when we saw Godzilla at Young and Dundas, but it was very warm in there.
Yeah. And so that was kind of, adding on to it as well. And so, you know, 20 to 30 minutes into this film, these two guys come back, and
Hands full of popcorn, beers, candy.
yeah, and they're shuffling through. The guy who is going to be doing all the talking through this conversation literally pelvis thrusts in my face, almost like he was doing it. I think he was doing it on purpose,
Oh,
but
no, he absolutely was.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
he
And so I'm
absolutely
like,
was.
dude,
And
that's
the movie's
basically
already
that's
on at this
basically
time.
sexual assault. Sorry, it is. And like
No,
there's
if you thrust your groin into someone's face, like that is absolutely disgusting.
yeah,
And just like also the movie is happening right now too, where you're trying to watch as a film critic, like trying to not that he knows that, but it doesn't matter if you're a film critic or not. You're a human being in this theater
yeah.
trying to watch a goddamn movie. Like
So
so
thanks for that. They go to sit down, and as soon as they sit down, they start talking, or at least this one guy is, and he is literally going. He's just a motor mouth. Like he won't stop. He's talking to the like not
his
only.
buddy, he's talking to the people beside him, he's
Yeah,
talking.
and this couple he's talking to, he begins like saying like, oh, do you want, like, have some popcorn, have this and put this on it and do this, and then the one guy's kind of like trying to like, get him to kind of quiet down by like, okay, fine, I'll grab one, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts talking to her, and then it keeps going and going, and he's reacting to the film, and then he's talking to them again and
He's
saying,
yelling Rocky whenever
Yeah,
he's
do
a
you
guy
even like
strolls
this
in
movie?
20.
This movie kind of sucks. This movie's not great.
That was later in the
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but yeah.
He's like, okay, after this movie's done, dinner's on me, to the couple that's sitting next to him, and it's like, I'm gonna buy drinks, we're gonna do everything, da, da, da. And then he starts pulling out his phone,
throughout the
and
whole movie.
throughout the whole film. And the first
And if
time,
you haven't been to a press screening or an advanced screening, there's the guy we see all the time. He was there. And his crew is always there. And they had about, it seemed like 8 people in this theater, like
yeah,
watching, to make sure no one's recording, right? So they have security in the cinema to make sure people don't pull out their phones to record the post-credit scene or to record certain scenes, or just use your phone, like have some common courtesy. So this guy, this motherfucker, just not nonstop talking. Luckily, it's a loud ass movie, like Eric mentioned. Luckily, there are 4 seats down, so you probably got it more than I did because
oh
like
yeah.
I was on the aisle. Um, and then he's pulling out his phone, and people behind him are telling him to stop. The security is coming over multiple times, and each
And they're
time
saying,
he's
"Sir, you cannot have your phone out during a promo or press screening. You need to put it away." And he's like, "Okay, hand to God, I'll put
yeah,
it
I'm
away.
so
Thank you
sorry.
so
My
much."
and he goes, my girlfriend, she's insane. She's crazy. I'm like, oh, that of course that's what you say. Of course you're a trash person that's going to be like, it's my girlfriend's fault. She's an insane woman. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, you're such a fucking dickhead, dude. Like the
Hand to
worst
God.
person.
I'm gonna put
uh,
it away after
I'll
this. I
put it no
swear. Thank you
stop. But
so
then
much.
and then 10 minutes later pulls out his fucking phone. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's comical, but also just so aggravating. At this point, Eric, I don't know what to do anymore. Like I
I
just
don't
don't
either,
know.
especially
And
with this,
like
because this is, you know, we've gotten people that have pulled out their phone, or people that talk during the movie and adding their own commentary to, you know, someone they're sitting next to or
many of times
themselves.
I've told them myself to stop.
But this was something else entirely. Like, this was another level of obnoxiousness where, like, by the third or fourth time, that I'm surprised security did not
Didn't kick
ask
them
him to
out,
leave.
right? That's what I
And
mean.
and like
Like
he like there was one point where the security like came and told him again. He's like, "You know what? How about you just take my phone? How about that? You know what? You just take my phone." And then
like
by
he
the
couldn't
time,
even control himself
yeah,
to that. Like he needed it to be away from him. I'm like, oh my fucking god, guy.
by
For
the
two,
time we got to the like there was like maybe 20 minutes left of the movie.
he's having a full on conversation with the security guards too.
Yeah, and you finally get the row above him, row 8,
It's
I.
also turning on him.
Yeah, being like, "Shut the fuck up." And the guy's like, "I came here to have a good time, and like, you know, like we should be having a good time, and you shouldn't be yelling at me like this. It's like this is harassment, blah 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 blah." And then when the movie ends and people are shuffling out, the security guys are still all standing at the
And he's
side.
trying to like apologize to them or
It's
some
like,
bullshit.
you know what? I'm never. He's saying to Row I, he's like, You know what? You guys have convinced me. I'm never gonna go out and see another movie again because
Good.
I disrupted you guys, and you know what? I made you feel bad, so I'm gonna be a martyr and blah 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 and blah, 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 blah. And then he goes and starts talking to the security people, and then like there are still people from row I that are talking to him as well, being like, "What the fuck is going on, man? Like what? Like." He should
He
have been
kept trying to
removed.
show the security that he wasn't recording, but then they were like, that's not the point, bro. Like, yes, we're supposed to make sure you're not recording the movie, but also don't pull out your fucking phone nonstop and talk to people nonstop.
You're not at
And like,
home.
and you're yelling at the screen multiple times and you want it to be about you. And I'm like, I don't understand these people and I just don't get it. Like what, and he was drunk. They were both drunk as hell. And like, and even the security guy who we see at our morning screenings, we see at all of these screenings, he was like, where did these guys come from? He's like, these fucking drunks. Like, he's just like, cause he was mad at the end of the movie. And I'm like, you guys, and I understand why they don't want to kick him out because like they want him to just listen to them because they don't want to cause a giant scene in the movie as well of like,
But he caused a scene through the
I
entire
know, but
movie.
imagine trying to kick him out, how that would
Yeah.
go, right? Like you'd have to like, who the fuck knows? But like, that's the problem with all of this shit. And just like, it was one of the worst pairs of people I've ever had. And I could only imagine if I was sitting beside them, Eric, I would be banished because I would have lost my goddamn mind. And like and that's the thing. Like it's if I get up and make a scene, like I'm there for work, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm there on for business. I can't be that guy because if that gets back to being like Matt got into a fight in the theater with 2 drunk guys because they wouldn't stop is like is bad. I would have had to keep going up and telling someone and going, you have to throw these guys out. Like that's what I would have done. Like I would have just gone out and been like, you have to kick these guys out of the theater. You have to. They're being awful. And like for them to not do that was wild. and just make it about themselves and completely ruin the experience for so many people, because there were people behind them yelling at them, as Eric mentioned, and just like, yeah, it's just those guys that you like, again, just these mid-20s, like
It has to be about me.
tattooed, like, kind of douchebag guys that just like think they're the ones that they're like, why can't you guys have fun? Let's have a good time. Like, you don't want to fist bump me, you don't want me to dance on you, kind of thing. Like, I'm just trying to have a good time here. Like, you guys are all lame. You guys are the lame ones, not me. And it's like,
We come to
bro,
see a
it's like,
movie, but you're really coming to see me. It's all about
yeah.
me. It
I'm
can't
just
be
trying to
about The
I'm a
Rock.
fun-loving guy who loves to get drunk and party, man. Like, I'm the fun one. You guys are all lame. Like, that's the type of person where I'm just like, good Christ. I'm surprised. Like, we did a really good review for Black Adam and we never mentioned it once because we were surprisingly able to focus on the movie. But I
Well,
think
because it was in a loud theater, and I think the movie, like there's only a couple quiet moments in the
is
film.
when I started to hear them more too.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
and like luckily that soundtrack and that sound design was able to kind of drown them out. So like even he was still literally having a full conversation as the whole movie went on. Um, it was, like that's where I was happy to see, like, generic action sequences. I was just kind of
totally,
like,
because it just drowned
thank
them
you.
out, right? Yeah. Instead
But it
of
was
something
still
that
like
you
him fighting it aggressively to be like, no, I've got to be heard. I'm surprised more people in the rest of the theater didn't hear it, because
yeah.
it seemed to be loud enough and disruptive enough for other people to notice. And like, I'm also surprised that that row behind him didn't react sooner. Like, it wasn't until like the last 20 minutes of the movie where
Because
they were
people
just
just
like,
finally started getting fed up, and he
yeah.
kept doing it more through when they did come in 20 minutes into the movie or 25 minutes into the movie. It's just like, I don't know, man. Like, it happens so often. It happens more so at these promo screenings than a paying audience, just because people feel entitled. And whether these guys were invited there, like dude, I bet you both of those guys were invited there as fucking influencers or some shit. And I would love to find them because, like, just to kind of email and go, these guys were fucking awful. Why did you invite them to this event? And like, why were they there? And they shouldn't be invited back to anything because it was just awful. That being said, like Eric and I just mentioned, the movie kind of did drown them out. You can listen to our review. We did enjoy the movie. I think we can say that to an extent. Um, and I think maybe we would have enjoyed it more if we didn't have these guys beside us the whole time. Who knows? Because it was like the cherry on top of a very exhausting day leading up to that point, and like a sour cherry on top, because like it was just the most distracting, terrible, awful people. And I know we have these stories a lot on this show. I think it's because Eric and I go to the movie so often that like I think everyone has these stories every once in a while because you're
Well, the
just,
last time was Escape Room 2, right? Where
yeah,
like it was
which I
kind of,
recently watched.
yeah, it was kind of aggressive, but this was something else. Like, this
Yeah.
truly was on another level where it kind of just felt like, okay, everything that you could do to possibly ruin everybody else's night, they did.
Yeah.
Like, and again, like I'm really good at having tunnel vision when watching a movie. Like, I can block people out. Like, I can focus on the movie, focus
Yeah.
on the job, focus on what you're here to
If
do.
it's not being properly projected or
Yeah, yeah. Like, but then with
this
this
was
is,
fine. The projection and sound was great. IMAX is always good at
yeah,
the shebang.
and with this is the kind of movie that you don't have to necessarily like know every single detail, even though like it is a very kind of nerdy movie too, and like,
Yeah.
there are aspects where it's like, okay, like people will fixate on certain things. But if this were Armageddon time and this was the same situation,
Yeah.
it would have been dealt with differently, because that movie is so quiet
I know, yeah.
that, like, if they were doing that, everybody would hear them in the theater.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's one of those things where, again, it's one thing to be loud, it's one thing to be talking, it's one thing to be putting out your phone, it's one thing to be intoxicated. All of that,
In one.
plus a personality that is so narcissistic, and insecure, I would assume that this person could not handle the fact that attention was on a movie and
How
not
these people don't know that they're
him.
awful is just mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, the event itself, We had a good time. It was, exhausting but thrilling to see The Rock. It was great to see the movie in IMAX. Like, I did really ultimately have a good time hanging out with Eric at the event. Like, I I really really did. It was just, I'm not one for celebrity, but The Rock, who I have seen in person, but from afar. Whether it's usually at a wrestling event. I've seen him multiple times when I was younger at WWE events, but to see him 10 feet from us do his thing, and just this gigantic man who obviously really wants to promote the shit out of this movie, it was cool to see him in person. So ultimately, I think that was the most memorable part, was those guys at in that screening. But overall, they didn't ruin the entire night. It was just, I was flabbergasted of how those people exist,
Yeah.
essentially. So check out our review for Black Adam. It should be up now. If not, it'll be up very very soon, where Eric and I talk about our thoughts in detail about the actual movie, and not just the events surrounding it. Whew, that was, there's always a
Was that a
story
Ric
every once in a
Flair?
while.
Woo!
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 Where do you want to go from here, Eric? Do you want to talk about what we've been watching? Do we want to jump into the Harrison Ford thing, if swing over to the MCU, or
I
what?
think we should do some news before we get into what we've been watching, just
Yeah.
because news we tend to neglect from time to time.
We do.
So
This show has shifted into just Matt and Eric hang out and talk about whatever they want,
yeah,
rather than being like a
hey,
place you're gonna go get your
it's our
news.
show.
If there's some news that piques our interest, we'll talk about it. So the big one, which was
Oh, I just want to quickly say that this part of our show has been sponsored by Midnight Cream.
God, we'll get to that too. Um, that can be a news thing that we talk about, but I do want to talk about, we'll go from the DCEU to the MCU. Surprise, surprise, me talking about the MCU, but um, I think a surprising piece of news, because I didn't believe it when I heard it last week, when it was rumored, and it's been rumored for a little while, but now it's actually, been reported by Hollywood Reporter and Variety, so like sources I actually trust. um which even they can get things wrong sometimes, but it looks like Harrison Ford is going to be joining the MCU as Thunderbolt Ross, taking over the role from William Hurt, starting with Captain America New World Order, and also in the Thunderbolts film.
I want
I
my family back.
I did not expect this, because, like, I thought, I know Harrison Ford has done some giant franchises, done some great movies, done some bad movies, but Harrison Ford, always known as this grumpy old dude now, who didn't care about Star Wars, or ever did. I think does care about Indiana Jones to an extent. Didn't think he'd come back for another one. Didn't think I'd be hearing that he would be playing a character in the MCU. I just thought, like, but maybe money talks, maybe his relationship with Disney and stuff like that, with Star Wars and Indiana Jones talks. I don't know. But I think it's very interesting. And I love Harrison Ford. So to see him part of, a cinematic universe I really care about. And we were curious about how they were going to handle the passing of William Hurt, right? So Harrison Ford, it looks like it's just going to be like he's playing the version we've seen throughout all of these years, unless it's a multiverse version. But I think it'll probably just be the same version.
Yes, and his daughter Betty will still not be acknowledged in any capacity whatsoever. You know what? It's one of those things where, like, I think I would have been more surprised if it was something that had like it was announced in Harrison Ford's prime, when he was making movies
Sure.
like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Blade Runner and the original Star Wars movies, and then like, oh, he goes and does this really popular kind of like franchise. I don't know what the equivalent would be at that point. I guess it would have been Star Wars or Indiana Jones, but um, because of like, and I even tweeted this, because of like the Expendables 3 and him joining that movie,
That is a fair
el-
point.
11 years ago or 12 years ago now. It kind of feels like after that it's like, okay, like literally, like Harrison Ford can be in anything. And it's the same thing with like the sequel to Anchorman. It's like you look at Harrison Ford's career in the last decade or so, it's like,
That's
yeah,
fair.
he's been taking a lot of roles for the money. And also, I mean, another thing to consider is that he probably has grandchildren that love this stuff as well, so he's probably thinking of them. I think the most interesting question to ask is what Harrison Ford is going to show up. Is it going to be phoning it in Ford, or is it going to be Harrison Ford that actually wants to, give a really good performance in something like Blade Runner 2049? Like it might come down to the director he's working with, or the script, or how he just kind of feels replacing an actor who's already kind of played that role. But then also, William Hurt having replaced Sam Elliott, in the Incredible Hulk. So, like it's interesting. Like that's like a role that can be replaced and probably needed to be replaced given where that character's storyline is going. But then also, even with, on the eve of Wakanda Forever coming out, the decision being made not to replace Chadwick Boseman. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that I'm sure someone will ask Kevin Feige at some point. Why recast someone who just died as
I think it's
well?
almost like an old. I hate being ageist or anything either, but I think that is a little bit of ageism of being like, oh, William Hurt wasn't super old, but was an older man, and it's like almost a weird, like more expected versus unexpected thing of
But
like,
Harrison Ford's in his 80, like
I
he's 80,
know
right?
Harrison
So
Ford could bite the dust at any moment, but like it's yeah, I don't know. I think that's an interesting conversation, and I think maybe just because of how young Chadwick was and being the lead in those movies, and I don't know, like a respect thing to be like, yeah, but
which I
I
think
don't.
I think it worked. I'm not saying that
Yeah,
it should be done or shouldn't be done. I think it's just more of something to present and sort of have
totally.
that
Yeah,
conversation about, because again, it's like, okay, so, you know, William Hurt, his personal life has been discussed, and
yeah.
some of the problematic nature there, but um yeah, it's just weird that, somebody who recently passed away is being recast, and there, unless there is a multiverse angle, which there very well could be, um there isn't going to be much of a sort of, change there. Like maybe
I
there'll
don't
be
think
an
there will. I
angel
think
like
it'll
Don
be
Cheadle
more.
coming
Yeah,
in, to play War Machine, and
I think
then
it's more like that than it
yeah,
is a multiverse thing. Like, I think you could have
yeah,
Sam
it's me,
Elliott
Thaddeus.
show
Get
up at
over
some
it.
point. Yeah.
you know,
I don't know. I just Harrison Ford. I can't wait to see him do press for this movie, and people ask him MCU
I
questions, and
don't
he
care.
goes, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." like when they're like, "Oh, do you think Thaddeus Ross will turn into Red Hulk?" And he'll go, "I don't know what that is." like and or maybe he will be Red Hulk at some point, but I can't imagine you got Harrison Ford in a mocap suit or
No,
anything like
I think the
like
man
uh
has too much dignity to do to a mocap. Not that putting yourself in a mocap. I just think like
no,
he's of a
like
generation where it's
yeah,
like, I
who
don't
want
need
like
to do
Mark
this
Ruffalo
crap.
has no problem doing that,
Yeah,
wearing a onesie and having
just
tennis
get
balls
somebody
on him.
else to do it and
But
put
like
my face on a Red Hulk.
that's what he'll say. He'll be like, I don't care what you do, just I'm not going in that thing. Like I that's what fascinates me about it, right? And he's such a huge name. He's Han Solo, he's Indiana Jones. So I mean, I guess it only makes sense that he's also going to play a character in the MCU. Like
Right.
it literally, those are like three of the biggest things ever, and all Disney properties. So like it's it's not surprising and surprising, I guess. I just didn't I heard that rumor a while ago, and I was like, that can't be true. And then like I'm like, oh no, they got Harrison Ford. So and we've made the joke for the last 10 years of like everyone is going to do a Marvel movie at some point. Everyone. Like if Christian Bale can play a villain in the
And
MCU
Michael
after playing
Keaton.
Michael Keaton and after playing Batman, like I wouldn't be surprised if The Rock does a Marvel movie 5 to 10 years down the line, depending on how the DCEU stuff pans out. But like, um, I think no one is untouchable when it comes to this stuff. And
Because it
it's
makes money,
just,
right? And
yeah,
like it's
it's popular. It's like you
it's
said,
a
a lot of them have
product as
kids
well,
and
right? Like it
kids that
like
might be obsessed with it or grandkids. Yeah. So
yeah, like I remember Robert Redford saying the same thing. Like he didn't really know much about it, and the reason why he joined, Captain
Captain
America:
America.
The
Yeah.
Winter Soldier was because his grandkids really watched those movies, and like he, you know, has a business to run in Sundance and things like that. And so, it's a good kind of like one-off kind of thing where it's like, I come in and do my bit and then go out. I mean, Harrison Ford seems to be doing more than one movie, so
But
that
I
will.
still think there'll be smaller roles in both,
Oh,
right? Like
definitely, but it is
Thaddeus
a big
Ross is
name
never really,
too.
yeah, it's a name to put and a face to put on the poster for sure. And I think it definitely helps those movies, especially Captain America, where you don't necessarily have Chris Evans anymore. And that you're kind of have to hope Anthony Mackie can sell a
You're
movie,
saying that
right?
Tim Blake Nelson isn't a
Um,
selling point for the new Captain America
um,
movie?
yeah. So I mean, there's more connection to the Incredible Hulk, which is interesting too,
Yeah,
right?
again,
So
that is the weirdest part of this whole thing, and even watching She-Hulk and
Liv
hearing like,
Tyler's got to. Why hasn't she yet? I don't
yeah, or why
understand.
haven't they recast her?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like it's like that's the thing where like even with She-Hulk, ending its season recently,
Which
it's
we can
like,
talk about in a moment too,
yeah,
when or at the end.
it's one of those things where the Incredible Hulk is such a weird kind of outlier within the canon of the rest of the MCU that it's acknowledged and also not acknowledged at the same time. So it's like, yeah, like the Betty thing, like Betty's only ever been brought up in What If, and that even isn't necessarily considered canon. Or it could be, I
It's
guess, because
all
it's
yeah,
multiverse. But
yeah, yeah.
that's the only other time that Betty Ross has ever been brought up. And then yeah, like you've had, you know, um, Sam Elliott play Thaddeus in Ang Lee's Hulk. You've had William Hurt play him in the Incredible Hulk, and then go into the MCU. And now you're having Harrison Ford. Like it's almost like this like ongoing joke, like who's going to be next to take that role on. It's almost like Felix Leiter in the Bond movies. Every time there's a new Bond film, Felix Leiter is always played, other than the more recent ones with Jeffrey Wright. Felix Leiter is always played by a different actor, to the point where like anytime he's introduced, Bond or Felix have to reintroduce themselves, not
Yeah.
to each other but to the audience, to tell you this is the new actor
This is
playing that
Felix
role.
Leiter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool. I mean, I love Harrison Ford. I agree with you of like what Harrison Ford we're gonna get, right? Like even as he's gotten older, like since the Expendables 3, which you brought up, which and Anchorman 2 were almost in like the same time, and Ender's Game. Like
Oh God,
there
yeah.
was that stretch of movies from, Paranoia to
Oh God, that film.
yeah, Cowboys, and actually it probably starts with like Cowboys and Aliens, like, or I don't know, like our Crystal Skull. Everything was downhill from there, but like, not downhill. Like
He
I
got
think
out of
he's
the fridge and was like, you know what? I'm just gonna make some money.
so I understand what you're saying there. Like I do like him in Force Awakens and Blade Runner, and
Because it felt like he was actually engaged with the material and he was giving performances, where a lot of those movies you just mentioned, I think he's actually also having a lot of fun in Expendables 3. But he was also kind of replacing Bruce Willis at that point, right? So
yeah,
but a lot of his roles kind of feel like he is sleepwalking through, his scenes, and like he's kind of really just phoning it in.
yeah, and I'm wondering how much, because like Thunderbolt Ross in the MCU really just shows up for a scene and then bounces, right? Like
Yeah.
William Hurt has been popping up frequently, but like it's usually just in a scene or two, right? Like he hasn't had a substantial role. And I know the Thunderbolts really much is that's why I thought they might recast the role, because I'm like, I don't think you can do Thunderbolts without Thaddeus Ross, right? Like it's literally named after him. So
Well, you could
um
have, I guess, had a narrative where he
yeah.
passes and in his name they create this group, and then you
Yeah.
could have Julie Louis Dreyfus's character come in and kind of like take over, right? Because I think she's
Uh-huh.
going to be like the kind of like middle person, the middle, yeah,
Woman,
between,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's cool, I guess. I'm here for it. So, and I'm sure we'll get way more
Well, I
MCU
mean, we
kind of
have as well,
casting.
with like all the delays as well, with like,
Oh yeah,
Blade being put on the back burner to better develop the script, which I'm all for. I think if you rush into things,
I agree.
like you have a product that's not. But then again, I mean, if you spend 15 years on something and you still kind of have a middle of the road movie, what does that go to show? But I do feel like the Marvel kind of conveyor belt does go too fast at times for, some filmmakers and screenwriters and
Totally.
visual
Slow
effects
down a little bit.
artists.
I'm fine with
Yeah.
that. Like, we
Yeah.
didn't need 2 Avengers movies in a year, and I'm glad that they're now a year apart from each other. Like,
Yeah.
that's too much. You want an Avengers movie to still feel big, like an impactful, like, thing that
It's
you
an
don't
event
get that. Yeah.
film, right?
Yeah, that you don't get that often. Getting 2 of them in the same year, I think, would undercut Secret Wars, right? Like, if you got Kang Dynasty 4 months before, 6 months before, or whatever, like, I feel like it does kind of undercut Secret Wars. So just shifting everything, you shifted a bunch of stuff: Fantastic Four, Deadpool, Blade, and Secret Wars. That, like, I'm fine with that. Like, I want these things to be spread out a little bit more. Like, I understand why you keep pumping these out, why we have the shows, why we have the movies, but, like, it's this problem we had with Star Wars, where I guess Star Wars struggled more than the MCU, of, like, we were getting way too much Star Wars way too quickly, where it kind of got watered down a little bit, to the point where when that like didn't feel as like special, right? And like, I may be being too precious over it, and who cares, but
Yeah, be more like Tony
um
Gilroy.
yeah, I mean, we'll get to
Fuck
Andor,
Star
and
Wars.
we'll
I'll
get
still
to
make a series about it though.
we'll get to Andor and She-Hulk at the end of the episode, when we talk about what we've been watching. But yeah, I think spreading them out a little bit more and giving people time to actually make the movie that they want to make is a good thing. So we shall see. Any other news you wanted to talk about that we missed or that was that the big one? I mean, we got the Creed 3 trailer. We'll touch on it briefly. Like, um
Good luck, Ant-Man.
yeah. Um, it looks like more Creed. Cool that Michael B. Jordan's getting to try to direct it. I think it makes sense for a movie in the Rocky franchise.
No Stallone
Um,
though, speaking of Rocky,
yeah,
so
no Stallone. But I like the route that they're going with it. Yeah, Jonathan Majors looks gigantic, and just, I love that guy. So, like, I'm excited to see him in this, and Ant-Man, and stuff moving forward, and becoming just a giant movie star. So I'm thrilled with that. Creed 3 looks fun. Like, I'm here for more Creed. I love the first 2 Creed movies. So
yeah, I think the first Creed film is pretty much as close to a masterpiece as you can put together, and reinvented, uh, you know, the Rocky franchise in such a way that it was like, okay, like you can really do something different. And I think that's part of why something like Cobra Kai, came about, because they saw potential there, and sort of, going left instead of going right, and making an interesting decision in terms of what path you follow after you've kind of, been down this one direction for so long, and reinvent, the characters that you're familiar with, but also kind of, introduce new ones that you like just as much. The second Creed movie I think is okay.
yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think the
I
first one
still
is
think it's
much better.
fun. I
Yeah,
still think it's
same.
a fun movie, and I think like there's a lot to enjoy, but it didn't have the same impact as that first movie did, where it was like, oh man, like it reminded me why I loved Rocky so much as well, on top of loving Creed. With this, it kind of feels like, oh, like we're getting kind of like a classic like sports entertainment movie, and Michael B. Jordan making his directorial debut. We'll see, what kind of muscles he flexes there, if there's going to be anything, like, single takes or anything like that that's stylish, or if he's going to kind of keep it more about, the kind of friendship slash falling out of both Donnie and Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, who, yeah, like is like, uh, just an amazing actor, and now seeing him, pop up in these bigger studio films in co-leading roles. It's really exciting to see his career flourish the way it has in the last few years.
Absolutely. The other trailer we should talk about. We've already talked about Mario, but we got to talk about Megan.
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh
Eric, you
baby.
got to see the Megan trailer with an audience, which would have been thrilling. But
It
um,
was. It was
I
thrilling, Matt.
I have this feeling. So, people, if you haven't watched the Megan trailer, go watch it. It's basically, I guess, Chucky for the 21st century, I guess, where
Although the
um,
Child's Play remake was that.
yeah, I guess, but Yeah, you have this basically this android, not android, this robot, that little girl robot that kills people. That's all you need to know. But she's very creepy looking. It's got some weird dark humor in that trailer. It's written by one of the writers of Malignant, so that already I'm like, yep, sign me up. And then I think the director, you said Eric, his last movie was good as well, right?
Household, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's, again, I don't want to ruin anything, but it does
yeah.
fall into a subgenre of horror movies where, if I were to name the other films I'm referencing,
Okay.
you would know kind of what the twist is in the film. But it was really well made. I'm surprised it's taken this long for like him to get to America and make something here, because um, that movie is a New Zealand production. So yeah, I'm very curious now to see if some of that humor from Household will translate. So,
Yeah, it looks funny. And you said the crowd went crazy for the trailer too.
dude, there were people like, as soon as you see the doll introduced in the trailer, they're just
You're
like,
like,
"Fuck no."
yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm here for it, and it seems like it has some of that. Like even the way that Megan rises up reminds me of Gabriel, right?
Yeah, the
From
kind of
Malignant.
almost that kind of athletic kind of,
Like yeah,
what's
like
the word I'm
lying
looking, that
down just stands
that
up. Yeah.
physicality where it's like that kind of, it's almost like a dance. It's
Yeah.
almost a
Well, there
combination
is
of a
literal
dance and a
dancing in the
fight.
trailer too,
Yeah.
which is very, very funny. So, comes out in January. I have already seen it go viral on TikTok. I've seen it kind of go viral on Twitter. So like I'm curious if that will translate
Megan's the people's champ.
um to a January, box office that, could be pretty quiet. So,
Horror
it
does well
has
in January. I mean, look at how the, Five Cream did, right?
yeah.
Like it's I think it's a good time for, movies that aren't going to be like, it's a good palate cleanser because you have award season kind of stuff still kind of playing the field when it comes to platform releases, but then you also have something like this, which is kind of just like pure entertainment, and like
Mhm.
it's just selling you on, the high concept of a killer doll, and just all you need sometimes is the image of something, whether it be a smiling face or a killer clown. That's all you need, and I think the movie will do better than what Universal and Blumhouse are even expecting it to do.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to what we've been watching to wrap up the show. Eric, I think we got to start with both She-Hulk and Andor, cuz
Yes.
the last, She-Hulk, we'll start there since we were on an MCU kick, and then we'll get into Andor cuz Andor, holy crap, is really good. She-Hulk also very, very good. There's just a lot of good nerdy TV on right now. And She-Hulk, I think, wrapped up its first season. Episode 9 aired last week. We won't go into spoilers or anything if in case you haven't caught up, but we might do a spoiler cast because I think there's enough there that maybe not right away, but there is enough there that I do really want to talk about in spoiler form. I really enjoyed the hell out of She-Hulk this season. I think episodes 8 and 9 were fantastic and really showed how clever the storytelling was, where I didn't even necessarily need um much plot, which in a meta way the finale does touch on. But its storytelling was very clever in the way that it planted all these seeds and ultimately um, was very character driven, based off Jennifer's life and what she was going through and how these men were treating her and just how men treat women in general, especially women of prominence or celebrity and things like that too. And I think the movie was, or the show was very, very smart while still being a very funny sitcom-esque law half hour comedy that but still had a lot of ramifications for the MCU, had a lot of just great, like I said, character moments, fun action sequences, even though there weren't that many of them and never really needed them. And just a genuinely enjoyable show that felt episodic, felt like like a television show, not an extended movie. But then also played up all those things to kind of have this both a meta commentary on the superhero genre, how men, some toxic masculinity gets involved into superhero culture and in life in general. And I just really enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, I liked it as well. I think that the last two episodes go to some darker places that I wasn't expecting, and then
Same, yeah.
also, you know, the fourth wall breaking thing. It's always dependent on how good the writing is, because sometimes you have writers or scripts that come off as smug or as though they're smarter than the actual material they're working with here. It's playful enough and also engaging with its themes and its concepts of, you mentioned, toxic masculinity, but also like ownership and gatekeeping, and the idea of who the MCU is for, and what it means to people. I think the strongest aspect of this whole season is that it decides not to go in the traditional third act route. And without spoiling anything, it was the first show or movie within the MCU that kind of felt like, oh, they are actively now trying to figure out a way to not
Do the same
conclude
thing.
like every other comic book movie, not just MCU movie, but just every other comic book film. And I think for that alone, I appreciate it, even though again, some of the cleverness and tongue in cheek kind of qualities don't always land. I don't think it's always as funny as it's trying to be, but I also think that what it's saying has more weight and consideration than what a lot of these other comic book films have had. And we talked about this with Thor Love and Thunder, and even with our comments on Deadpool 3 getting announced. Like, not every comic book adaptation, not every Marvel movie needs to be the same as She-Hulk or Deadpool 3 or Thor Ragnarok. Like, this fitted the character and its tone, and it was true to who Jennifer was, and with that it works. So I think that the writing team and the directors and everybody that kind of worked on this were able to kind of figure out what worked best for the character and put
Yeah.
the character before plot.
Yep.
And with other Marvel properties moving forward, I hope they consider the same thing. It's like, okay, well, with Blade being delayed, maybe really think about how you want to present Blade. Blade is a darker character, and
Mhm.
Blade is a character that you know has a much more kind of, talking about anti-heroes, is that kind of guy. And if you already have the Wesley Snipes movies as kind of like a model to be like, okay, well, we can still have fun with it, but we can add the brooding quality into that. That's something that you want to do. But you know you look at Moon Knight, we had some problems with Moon Knight where it came to how self-serious it was. So,
Yeah.
there's always, I think it's always about figuring out how the character works within their world first before considering how the character will work in the overall arc of the rest of the universe. And I think the other important aspect of this show, or the thing that makes it come together as a whole, is Tatiana Maslany. I think that she
I
is
was just gonna bring her up. She is
the
absolutely
best.
fantastic.
She is so charming, unbelievably talented as an actor. Um, you know, I'm so happy that they were able to find a decent balance between doing, the motion capture, She-Hulk, and letting her be Jennifer, because I think it kind of did create that split personality,
And
that
wanting
kind
to
of,
be Jennifer, right? And be taken
yeah,
seriously as Jennifer too, which
just
is a big,
Jen.
yeah, which is a big part of the show. She is just so good. She oozes chemistry with every single person in that show, and I don't think many people can have that. There's usually the one person, maybe Titania, Jamila Jamil's character. I didn't care much for that whole kind of plot line, but everything else, I just think she just, her stuff with, at this point, I think we can talk about Matt Murdock. Um, Absolutely incredible. Like, I love those two, that episode of them two together. I I was like I cannot believe I love these two characters this much together. I was not expecting that at all. And I just think like every single person, whether it was her best friend, who I thought was excellent in the show, um even Tim Roth coming back, like I thought,
Zen Roth,
yeah,
he's
Zen.
so chill in this.
I loved everything with him, and even his interactions with Jen were great. Her stuff with Bruce and everyone, like it just everyone she talked with, and then just when she was on her own as well and breaking the fourth wall, or like just her delivery on everything was just so pitch perfect and so fantastic that like she became skyrocketed to like one of my favorite MCU characters, and like I
And a
want to
great
see her.
performance
Yeah, and
too,
a great,
you know?
yeah, that's what I mean. Just she's great, and that makes her one of my favorite characters because the performance is so great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's excellent. If you dropped out or didn't finish it, I assure you, go back and like watch it. It is really really good. Um, moving on to Andor,
Oh,
which,
yeah.
so Eric, you had a jam packed weekend. You caught up with She-Hulk. You caught up with Andor.
Watched
Um,
Halloween Ends and Smile.
yeah. Um, the last episode of Andor, which is episode 6,
The
correct?
Eye.
The Eye is one of the best episodes of television I have watched in a long time. And I think it's one of the best pieces of Star Wars we've gotten in a long time. It feels 100% Star Wars and also completely different than a lot of Star Wars we've been getting, and was one of the most thrilling kind of hours I've had in a very long time. It is excellent.
Yeah, it's so tense and well constructed from a story, you know, standpoint, that when you're watching this this heist go down, you feel the tension mounting and every kind of thing going all at once, and you're waiting for like what's that moment where everything is going to fall down like a, a house of cards, and like the one thing that they didn't anticipate, or like they're classic tropes within that genre, but the way that it is constructed over the course of this episode, and even in the past episode as well, with kind of the setup and getting to know the rest of the team members and still kind of being on edge even with them and not really completely trusting them, Cassian, and where he goes with this episode. And it is such, like, it's one of those things where it's like, if it wasn't for the rehearsal and Barry being released this year, I would say it is the best piece of television I have watched in the last year.
Fair.
um but I do think that it is the
Hey,
single
even being
best.
in the same conversation of those two things that you said
Right.
is impressive.
But I do think it is the single best piece of Star Wars content I have seen since the original trilogy. Like,
I
I
don't
like this even
disagree.
I
I
even
don't
like this
disagree.
more than The Last Jedi. Like, I think it reminded me so much of why I loved Star Wars in the first place, and it's getting back to those core themes and the elements that make Star Wars what it is. And that's great storytelling with, tributes and homages to,
Other genres and
classic
yeah,
filmmaking.
movies. Yeah.
This is literally a World War II story being told, from the front lines in a lot of ways. And then, it's a thrilling heist story, and Dan Gilroy and Tony Gilroy and Susanna White, like this team is just, it's a slow build, but it's one that earns every moment, and it is such a beautifully
It's
constructed
gorgeous
piece
too. Yeah, and
of
just
filmmaking, and like the mechanics of it are amazing, like just where certain characters are going or where they are at the moment. And
the
you know
setups, the payoffs, the
yeah,
like the unexpectedness of it all. Like I think this show is so interesting because prequels can be very predictable because you know where a character ends up, and we had this whole conversation a few episodes ago, I think, and talking about Better Call Saul and things like that. Where this is also doing that thing where it's yes, we ultimately know where Cassian Andor ends up, but we don't really know about any of
dead.
these other characters. Yeah.
He's dead.
And but this show does such a good job of introducing new characters and being unexpected of how they use them, and just fuck man, there were so many times where I went like, oh shit. Like, and I haven't said that at a Star Wars thing in forever. I think since Last Jedi, and I agree with you that I might like this more than The Last Jedi, where I was like, oh, this is unexpected. It feels completely fresh while still feeling familiar, whether it's familiar for Star Wars, familiar for these other genres we're talking about, but then taking all those pieces and making something wholly unique, of taking stuff from World War II movies, taking stuff from spy movies, taking stuff from those genres, and just kind of mashing that all together, but then still like having so much Star Wars in it. And this goes back to Tony Gilroy, Dan Gilroy, Susanna White, who directed this episode. I don't know her attachment to Star Wars, but I know the Gilroys have talked about how they had no attachment to Star Wars. And, but then they
Which
can
is
kind of,
amazing.
which then they can look at, probably watch Rogue One and watch some of these other Star Wars movies, and the way that like TIE fighters are used are the scariest I've ever seen TIE fighters ever in Star Wars, and just seeing someone get into those and launch and chase after someone, and this whole heist sequence. You could watch just this episode, and I think this is like a little mini movie. You don't necessarily need to have all the setup, even though the setup adds to it. I think you could just show someone the eye and just go, this is an incredible hour story, and just show them this heist episode, and you would still be like, holy fuck, that was fantastic. And like, I think the performances are amazing, where the characters go is amazing, the actual heist is amazing, how it's set up and how tense every moment is, because again, you don't know what happens to 99% of these characters. I thought the cinematography, like we've talked about on this show, of like not shooting on green screen and shooting on actual fucking locations, like it does so much to add to the show. Like it really does. Just like, even if you're in an open fucking field, like it just looks like you're actually on a different planet, not just in a sound stage, right? Like it really helps. And like this show, I'm sure there is green screen, and I'm sure there is the volume and stuff like that that they use, but the way that they somehow have managed to mix real locations with that stuff, like, has really added, and felt like Star Wars, right? Because like, yeah, we can commend JJ Abrams and Ryan Johnson for using like practical puppets and things like that, and to try to add that Star Wars kind of vibe to things. But then as you got into further along, and there's more CG and more green screen. I mean, don't talk about the prequels, which were all blue screen, but like and when you got into Mandalorian and Obi-Wan, like the volume was that new thing where I could see, Tony Gilroy and Dan Gilroy and everyone on the show just be going like, we don't, let's do this how it should be, which is on location at these places. And I think that helps so much. And there are just some really gorgeous moments in this episode too, like the scene with all the different like the, is it asteroids or whatever's happening,
Yeah, because
or
it's that's what the eye
like a,
is, right? It's like this
yeah,
kind of like
like shower, like
traditional, yeah, this moment that happens every so often, and
and the
the people of the planet
yeah,
specifically
the
kind of
indigenous
gather.
culture, yeah,
Yeah,
like
and like even that is interesting in how it's talking about colonization and sort of how this invading empire
is going
treats
into
those
planets, and yeah, and just does
of.
not give a flying fuck about them,
Yeah,
and
and I
just
even
like,
like the design of their kind of their base. It almost looks like a dam, the way that it's kind of designed, and like again, like thinking of the Dam Busters, that movie, and so like
it's
just the
brutal and violent at times too, and
oh,
just
it's
like,
it's unforgiving, and I think again, like I appreciate that Mon Mothra's there, but like a lot of these characters aren't necessarily directly connected to the original movies or just the Skywalker saga in general. Like it finally feels like we are getting a universe. Like
yeah.
we're it's not just like, oh, what a coincidence, I'm running into Lando, or
Oh,
I'm doing this
C-3PO
or
and
that. Yeah,
R2-D2 are here.
yeah,
Like it
what
might
a
be the first Star
surprise.
Wars thing where those two fuckers aren't in it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just, it's, or in some sense, right? Like, and I know ultimately the rebellion is the thing that kicks off the original Star Wars movie. So it still very much is attached to the Skywalker saga, but it does still seem so far removed from it, right? Like obviously the Empire and Darth Vader is not even really spoken about, and like it's very much focused on these characters, and ultimately we know Cassian Andor has a direct part into passing Princess Leia that fucking hard drive. Like we know that. We know CG Leia turns around and goes, "Hope." But it doesn't feel like that yet, like I'm sure maybe in season 2 we might get Mads Mikkelsen show up, and we might get more characters from Rogue
Ben
One show up,
Mendelsohn, or
and the android, right? And
yeah, voiced by Alan Tudyk.
yeah, so I think we'll probably get some of those elements in season 2, but we're only halfway through this season, and they gave us one of the best pieces of Star Wars that we've gotten since the OG trilogy, and like that is mind blowing to me. And like you mentioned, House of Cards, which I think is funny because Willimon wrote 3 episodes coming up, so I thought that was funny. But the people that they brought on with this, like that creator of House of Cards, you have Dan Gilroy, you have Tony Gilroy. Like it seems people that you wouldn't expect doing Star Wars, right? You have Stephen Schiff, who did he did some work on the Americans and stuff like that. So it just seems very adult as well, right? Like
Adult Star Wars.
like
Star
not
Wars After Dark.
well, it kind of feels like that,
It is a
right? Like
very
this is
mature
like a
take
mature is a perfect word. Yeah.
on like the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian have stuff that I think
Still very
a
pulpy, still kind of
a younger audience can really get into, but I could also understand, you showing this to a younger kid and the kid being kind of bored by it, where
especially by
like,
those first 3
yeah, because
episodes.
it's
It's
building
dense too.
it's building the politics and the hierarchy of the Star Wars universe. It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's looking at the levels of government and the levels of, this dictatorship that has, recently formed, and how kind of, the mechanics and the inner workings of that kind of go about. And again, kind of the um backstabbing within those own organizations, or kind of, trying to usurp somebody that's ahead of you, and then like somebody being kind of so, gung-ho to be a part of that organization that they shoot themselves in the foot, because they are, feeling though that they need to be, at 100% all the time. So it's, yeah, it's just it really does feel like it is finally like dissecting the universe a little bit more, and looking in other corners of the galaxy, and not just like, oh well, we gotta connect this somehow to Luke and Leia and C-3PO and R2D2 and Lando and all your favorites.
A Jedi has to show up, Darth Vader has to show up.
Yeah, Chewie's gotta have a walk-on cameo.
Yeah, so I'm hoping I have faith now that we're not going to get that stuff, and it is very much going to stick with this. And it is
Yeah,
a
the Force
shame.
doesn't need to be with you all the time.
It is a shame that I have heard that it is performing worse than a lot of the other Star Wars stuff, because I think, again, Cassian Andor, not a character that people were like itching to get a series for. You almost shouldn't have called it Andor. Like I almost think they should have called it something else. But
I mean, if it was called Dash Rendar, whew.
they got it. That guy's got to show up at some point. Yeah, like I really hope more people give this a shot, right? Because like I'm sure it's still performing well. Don't get me wrong. Like I think hardcore Star Wars people will get around to it, even if they haven't yet. Like I've talked to other people that are like, "Oh yeah, I haven't watched it yet," and I'm like, "You got to, you got to. It's so good."
Yeah.
And I really do hope we have 6 more episodes, that I hope it does find that audience, because like it's maybe not being talked about on the level of a Mandalorian or even Obi-Wan. Maybe he's performing better than Boba Fett, but that was still an established character, and I guess
and
Andor
and there
was
seemed
too.
to be
But
more discussion about that anyways, even if it was negative with like online reactions. Like it seemed to be more in the consciousness when it was being released, where yeah, Andor for the most part does seem to be a very quiet
yeah, going under the radar a little bit.
response. Yeah, which I mean, in a way that these 2 episodes they wanted to go under the radar.
It is so good. If you guys
Yeah.
even just watch this last episode, like even if you don't, they'll give you a recap at the beginning. Like if you want to jump in halfway through, I mean, those first 3 episodes are slow. I think it picks up in episode 4, and then 4, 5, and 6 have been excellent, thrilling, dense, fantastic storytelling. So just like definitely go back and watch Andor. Um, Other than that, I've been watching Hot D. I've been watching The Mole on Netflix, which is great. I've been watching more Dragon Ball. I watched the Escape Room films with Nevis. Um, we watched Halloween Ends, where you guys can go check out I thought, a very awesome review that Eric and I did together, both spoiler and spoiler free. I've been trying to get into spooky season, but I haven't really like I haven't dove in yet. Um, so I've only been watching. We watched Escape Room because they're pretty tame.
They're horror
Like,
adjacent.
yeah, like tame when it comes to violence.
Saw
and,
light.
and yeah, they are diet Saw, the Saw Zero. So we watched those. Nevis enjoyed both of those, and I still enjoy both of those movies. They're, again, I think now watching them, I like the first one more than the second one, but I am curious to watch that director's cut of the second one because I guess they completely changed it. But I didn't want to pay for it, so I just watched it on Prime. Still entertaining movies, both of those, and much better seeing it without children running around and a horrible audience.
Yeah,
Speaking of
and a dad or babysitter yelling at us afterwards.
yeah, on the Dragon Ball front, I'm on the Majin Buu saga. Starting to get a little tired with Majin Buu, and I know I still got like a lot to go with
There is
that.
a lot of Boo.
So
You're my
I
boy, Boo.
just thought, oh boy, I'm like, all right, that's like,
he will change soon, so
yeah,
maybe that change will help. But I know what you're talking about.
Vegeta just did Vegeta's sacrifice for nothing again. Uh, so I'm enjoying it. I'm still like, I'm at a slower pace because after TIFF, it's been like a second to get back into it, but I'm still very much excited to finish that up. I'm on like episode 130. So like, I think I have 30 some episodes left. I think it goes to the 160s. So I'm getting
It'd be
there.
great if it was 169.
I hope so. Um, I'll get there.
I don't
Sorry,
doubt it, Matt. You don't have to convince me.
I'm writing this as what else we've been watching. Hot D is excellent. It's really, really good. Reminds me of the best of Game of Thrones. Patty Considine just absolutely crushing it. Olivia Cook crushing it, Emma Darcy crushing it, Matt Stone, like the guy from South Park is in
South
it.
Park. Matt Smith.
Matt Smith is crushing it. I think it's been excellent so far.
There's a breakout in the show as well, right? I don't, because I haven't watched it yet, but I know that like a lot of people were upset that like the time jump had to replace her.
Yeah, they replaced two of the younger actors, Millie
Yeah.
Alcock and
That's her. Yeah.
I forget the other actress's name. Yeah, the time jumps are weird. I think the pacing of the show is strange because people have told me that the book is more like a history textbook rather than a novel. So
Well, it's like The Hobbit,
it
right? Like it's an appendium,
yeah,
basically.
it jumps like it's basically giving you little snippets and then we'll jump 5 years, we'll jump 10 years kind of thing, right? So it is jarring in its pacing because it starts the first like half of the season are the younger actresses who play Rhaenyra Targaryen and Allison Hightower, but then you have people like Patty Considine and Reese Fons, like who don't get recast, Matt Smith, who don't get recast. Then you have the younger Allison and Rhaenyra being replaced with Olivia Cook and Emma D'Arcy. And then you have them having children who start off as children, but every 2 episodes they grow 5 years.
It's like the rehearsal.
Yeah, it is, dude. Where like then Olivia Cook and Emma Darcy stay the same, but then their kids go from babies to children to grown men and look almost the same age as them. But then Patty Considine looks like the crypt keeper, but Matt Smith looks the same and but changes his haircut. But then and Reese Fons looks exactly the same throughout the whole series and didn't age a day. So it's like I can understand it being very jarring, and it's hard because it does go, wait, which, and they're all named the fucking same name. So they're like, okay, this is Aegon, there's Rhaegon, there's
There's Egon.
Rhaenyra, there's Daenerys, and they're all named. So it's like, oh, that's Aegon the second. and
God,
it's like,
that's royalty though for you, right?
oh, incest and same
Yeah.
names. That's what royalty is. But like, so you're like, oh, they're cousins who were married. Oh, they're brother and sister that were married. Okay, that's an uncle she's fucking. Okay. Uncle
Uncle
Fucka.
Fucker.
Maybe that's why I had Matt Stone on the brain. So
Oh right,
like,
no, because you did tell me about that.
yeah.
You were,
So,
yeah,
and there's a crab person too.
crab
Uh,
people.
so I kept thinking of South Park. I think that's maybe why I said Matt Stone, but there's a lot, and it does go, wait, which kid is this? Oh, okay, that's the kid. Okay, he's got an eye patch. So that's that kid from a couple episodes ago, but now he's a grown ass man who looks older than his mom. Um, and Olivia Cook's not aging. Also, Olivia Cook looked very similar to the younger version of her. Like, didn't look like she aged that much. But then the Emma D'Arcy character, Rhaenyra, looks a lot older than the Millie Alcock version. So it's just like, anyways, the show's great, but it's a lot, and like it
Yeah.
does get. I can understand some people going, the fuck, like, so I find myself even doing that a lot
And
where,
when are they going to go to Nate's Lizard Lounge?
yeah, exactly. So it is an
It does
HBO
sound like the
show
rehearsal, though. It
where
does.
they
It
are
really does.
swapping out children, and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, dude, it is. That's a funny thing to bring up, but it is really good. So anyways, I know we're
I'll
kind of,
catch up with it when it's done. It's one of those shows where it's like a show like that I like to watch when it's finished. Where I think the rehearsal and Barry, were shows where it kind of felt like appointment viewing. Where this, it's like I'm sure it is good, but I'm still on that kind of like I felt burnt out by Game of
and I
Thrones.
understand that,
Yeah,
but this will win you back, I think. Like,
yeah,
it is very good, even if you know what happens, which they
yeah.
do it.
Nathan Fielder shows up. I
Yeah,
know what
he
happens.
becomes king of the Seven Kingdoms. He
That
sits on
would
the
be
iron.
amazing
He sits on the
with
Iron
his
Throne.
laptop and
Yeah. Um just him in a gray wig, a silver wig. The wigs are awful in the show, but I really do think
are
it
they
is
Mark Strong level wigs or
better than the fucking rat that was sitting on Mark Strong's head in Tar. Um or cat, whatever the hell you wanted to call it, but it's really good. Like, it's shocking at moments.
you
It's
think Tar's a
classic Game of
Targaryen?
Thrones. Like, it all comes to full circle, baby. Anyways, it's great. What else have I been watching? I think that's it. I want to watch Hellraiser. I got a VPN again, which
I hope that clears up.
is which I don't know if VPNs are like, are they okay? Like, I paid for Peacock to watch Halloween Ends, so I'm still paying for the movie. I'm not pirating anything. It's just like, it's just my internet thinks I'm in the US. So when I pay for Hulu and when I pay for Peacock, I am paying for Hellraiser and I am paying for Halloween Ends. It's just, I'm not in the US, so it's this weird gray zone. So anyways, I'm gonna watch Hellraiser. I think that's gonna be one of the things I watch on Hulu because we can't access that here. So,
No, it's not available on any platform, which you would think it would be on
like Prime
Disney
Video or
Star.
Disney Star, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
else have you been watching, my guy?
So it is the spooky season, so I've been slowly trying to watch some stuff that kind of, will get you in the mood for some pumpkin spiced lattes and colder weather. So I watched Parker Finn's Smile, a film that is doing quite well in the box office, especially considering that it was going to be a Paramount Players Plus uh, streaming film, and now it is a over I think $100 million box office sensation.
Really?
The movie itself is fine. I think ultimately it kind of lands in the middle of something like Final Destination and Hereditary, and It Follows. It's somewhere in that grouping where it's not, it's extremely high concept, but it's not completely void of a commentary or a perspective that it's trying to make on mental health and wellness. It's also a very tricky sort of rope to walk because it is playing within genre elements and exploitation that might come off as insensitive or somewhat frustrating. And I get that. But at the same time, I think it's also trying to make the point that there is still very much a stigma towards mental health and wellness in general, and how people, who are having difficulties in life, or trying to figure out what their diagnosis is, and how other people treat them. But that also kind of plays against it a little bit, because the main character, who's this um, therapist that works in an emergency ward, starts kind of seeing this smile that she inherits from one of her walk-in patients. And when her world starts to unravel, the people around her, specifically her sister and her fiance, treat her like she's a disease. And I just didn't buy into that completely, because I felt like, okay, yeah, there might be some friction or hostility there, but these are the people that are closest to you, and should really know, you know what you're going through, and be more understanding, where the film works in a way that it's servicing, a plot point, or a way to kind of, move things along, than it is considering how these characters would actually interact. Where, like, we talked a little bit about this with The Invisible Man. There's a moment in that movie where it kind of felt like Elizabeth Moss' sister wouldn't actually completely, excommunicate her in
Yeah.
that way, and this does something similar to that, but also it's trying to make a point about it as well. And it's like, it's a very well made movie. I think that's another thing that is taking a lot of people, including myself, by surprise. Like, you can tell that there's a lot of emphasis on the camera work, and how the transitions are made, and like, you can tell, like, it's not as good as Barbarian by any means, but like, I can see, like, okay, this director, making his first, feature, and basically a very gimmicky movie that's kind of all been marketed on the creepy smiley face, is doing some interesting stuff there that's probably better than what a lot of these movies that were being made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s would consider with the filmmaking. Like, it does feel like a calling card movie. So it's like, hey, people watch this movie and look what I can do, and like, get me the next gig, kind of thing. Um, so yeah, it's fine. I don't think it's great, but if you are interested in something that has a little bit more texture within the genre, that's in that kind of quote unquote elevated horror realm, but is still also kind of a classic studio B movie, then you could do worse. The audience that I saw it with seemed to really react to it, so that is saying something. And the smile, I think, in general, has been, a sinister smile has been used so much throughout
Just
history,
classic trope.
in film, so
And
like
one of
that does
Nevis's
work.
one of the things she hates most in scary movies is a creepy smile. So she's been hesitant to go see the movie because of that.
Yeah, it's a jump scare movie too. Like, it really is mostly dependent on jump scares, and there's a couple that are actually really well done, like, that are smarter with how it gets into the mindset of the main character. But then there are moments as well where it's like, okay, this is just literally like, to get the audience, to keep them entertained, and keep them shocked. But yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Not great. Not It's just derivative. That's ultimately kind of what it comes down to. Rewatched Wolfen and The Hidden on Criterion, because Criterion has curated 80s horror movies for this month. So, and I believe, I mean, it'll be dated by the time probably people are listening to this, but Kyle MacLachlan's doing a watch along for The Hidden on Criterion today, on October 18th. So, it's kind of cool that that movie now is kind of getting, more attention on it. And it was kind of like a really solid, you could look at it as a prototype to Agent Cooper, in Twin Peaks. So that's a lot of fun. Wolfen is a very underrated werewolf movie from the early 80s, in New York, with Albert Finney and Gregory Hines in one of his first roles. And like, that's the New York that we were talking about when we saw Armageddon Time, where like, it's kind of like still the trashy New York that hasn't been gentrified yet, that kind of is still dangerous but alluring at the same time, and has a lot of character. And just watching it as almost a document or an archival movie is worth it. But it's actually very well made, and it kind of does things with the sort of the folklore of the Wolfman that I think is really underrated and under considered, given that it's a movie that's kind of been mostly forgotten about. Both movies are Warner Archive releases, so you can buy them on Blu-ray as well. But yeah, they're solid little films. So
Cool, man.
yeah.
Anything else?
Not really. Return of the Living Dead got a 4K release through Scream Factory,
Is that the
so
one we watched?
we sure did. So I
Okay.
was sent a copy. Scream Factory sent that to me, so I appreciate them doing that. That's a movie I always like to watch this time of year as well. Just a goofy, satirical zombie movie with some of the most like over the top, but still, again, kind of interesting and poignant kind of moments within the genre. So yeah.
Anything else before we wrap for in the spooky season that you're gonna try to watch before Halloween, or that you have on your, because for me it's the new Hellraiser I'm gonna try to see. Uh I have an itch to watch The Thing after seeing it in Halloween Ends. And it's been a few years since we watched it at Mike's house. I haven't watched the 4K yet.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, The Thing is one of those movies I could watch anytime.
yeah,
I mean,
in the winter, Halloween, like, or
yeah.
anytime really, but like I think it
Um,
works for any of
I
that.
speaking of John Carpenter, one movie that I really want to rewatch again that I haven't for a little while, but I used to watch it all the time. Is Prince of Darkness, and I have the new 4K, which is also from Scream Factory. That movie is really underrated. It's a slow burn, but it is super creepy, and it kind of predates the usage of digital and video. Like there are sequences where, like, dream sequences where everybody's seeing the same dream, although like it's being broadcasted to them. That I would not be surprised if, later movies of like the late 90s into the early 2000s, and even found footage movies had some influence on. So I'm kind of wanting, and Donald Pleasance in that is like at 11. So I want to rewatch that. But in terms of new stuff, I mean,
Could be
Bones
new,
and
could
All
be old. Yeah.
doesn't come out until November.
We
Um,
might see it before Halloween, so maybe that'll.
right. And then yeah, I mean, there's the go-to stuff where it's like I could pick like any number of like 70s, 80s horror and stuff like that. But there's also part of me that still kind of just like wants to discover stuff. So like, whatever I find in the next couple of weeks that might interest me, I'll report back on. I mean, Vestron Video just announced that they're releasing Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 through 5, which, I mean, if you're looking for a horror anthology, there you go.
You've talked about them on this show, right?
They are so trashy. I mean, those movies won't be available until December on Blu-ray on physical media for the first time, but they are available, I think, on like iTunes, and I think Tubi had them on at one point as well. So
To be. Before we wrap, the other thing I did watch over the weekend was shout out to my dudes at Kind of Funny. We're in the hat. They did their big studio launch on Friday called The Spare Bedroom, which is a reference to their first um I guess office, which was in Greg's spare bedroom when they first launched Kind of Funny over 7 years ago. I did a Twitter thread, and I was watching that all on Friday and Saturday for 24 hours straight. They did a stream with some great bits, some inside joke stuff, but just kind of showing off the new studio space and what it's capable of. It is gorgeous. It's this giant kind of WWE LED screen where they have Tim. Shout out to Tim. Tim is ridiculous, but in the best way. And this giant LED screen where they can kind of switch out from a desk or a couch setup. They have a LED floor that they can roll in and out. They have an actual office space. They have a streaming space. They have like, it's a 5,000 square foot studio now, where they were in 900 square feet in their previous studio, and then they were in Greg's spare bedroom before that. So um I've been a fan of theirs since the beginning. I've been a collaborator for the last couple of years, and I don't think I would have been able to do that without work from home, or I don't know if that opportunity would have come up unless it was work for home. So I work from home. So I'm weirdly grateful for the last couple years, but it is so great to see that crew back together. And it made me miss those days where Eric and we see each other a lot all the time anyway. And we basically have mini podcasts as we're kind of talking, and we have done some in-person stuff with recording for TIFF and stuff like that, but on our phones. But I remember when we used to get together on a weekly basis to do this show in person, And then it's been so long, 3 years almost, of them being together in the same room. So just seeing the energy that they had, having that one-to-one, seeing a person, the timing is different. It makes it obviously a lot better to watch on YouTube rather than these kind of rectangles that everyone's been doing over the last couple of years. And I'm sure we'll continue to do, because just for convenience sake, we're not in the same city anymore, and things like that. Like, it was a pain in the ass for you to come here and do it in person, but I don't think our chemistry is any different in person than it is on here. But when you have a group of 4 or 5 people over Zoom, it sometimes can talk over each other. You have to raise your hand to speak and kind of stuff like that. And just like the energy of just being able to kind of pop in a room, make fun of someone, or feed off of each other, I think is very different. So the studio is gorgeous. Shout out to all of them. I watched way too much over Friday and Saturday. I watched a big chunk of the 24-hour stream. And then as we're recording this today is their first full day putting out content from the new studio. So it was fun to watch those guys. And they're very kind to us. Eric and I had Greg on this show. Tim's been on this show. Nick's been on this show. Joey's been on this show. I have been on their show multiple times. Eric and I did, commentaries for
Bloodsport.
for Bloodsport with Nick and Snowbike Mike. So that was a blast. So they've always been very good to us, and I'm just shout out to them, because it's a huge moment for them. That studio is absolutely wild. So I did watch that. That was the one last thing that I was watching over the weekend. And hopefully they still have the ability to kind of Zordon people in. So I'm hoping that I can still
Just be a giant gray face.
on their
Rangers.
on their big WWE screen behind them. So I'm hoping that will continue. So, and I'm hoping to see it in person someday. So shout out to those guys. Eric, any final thoughts before we wrap?
Do you think we should mention the Netflix proposal with the commercials?
Oh, sure.
Because I did
That's what
mention Midnight Cream, so
no one will understand that. Yeah, that's a weird spot to end, but
I mean, isn't this show weird?
yeah. I'm just putting a time code in. I'm not even going to put a new time code for this. We should have brought this up in the news segment to make fun of the Midnight Cream thing. Netflix is introducing an ad tier in Canada first, which is I think only a couple days, exclusive to Canada, which is going to be like $6, and they're going to have ads every 8 minutes or so. I believe that it said, like, in multiple times per hour, 4 to 5 times per hour, which seems like a lot. But then I was talking to Nevis about this, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds like YouTube." Because it's like, oh, every 10 minutes on YouTube, you usually get like a block of ads or something like that,
Well, Tubi does that as well.
or every 5 minutes. So I've never really used Tubi. Does Tubi have an ad-free version that you can do too?
I think so. I mean, Tubi is a free streaming platform, and their ads aren't like blocks. It's like they have, like, depending on the length of the film or the show that you're watching, there will be maybe an ad before the film, like YouTube, and then if it's a longer movie or show or what have you, there usually is a second ad in between there.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I, I put up with it on YouTube, even though when I had YouTube Premium for 3 months or whatever the trial thing was, I know why they give it to you for 3 months, because then you get used to not having ads on YouTube. So when you turn it off, you're like, oh man, this sucks so much.
It's like Letterbox as well, right? Like the ad version of Letterbox is really not clean, but then when you get the ad-free version based on your patron tier, it looks it looks great, like, and it's easy to navigate.
Yeah, and this being, not even free, you still have to pay $6, which you're still getting a lot of content for it. But I don't know if I could go back to just like watching streaming content with commercials, because Disney Plus is going to be doing the same thing coming up soon too. So it seems like and Hulu already has that, Peacock already has that. HBO Max is introducing an ad tier as well. So that seems to be the new thing to try to get a few more subscribers for the people who don't want to pay, upwards of $22 a month for Netflix for the 4K tier, or Disney Plus for I think $15 a month or $12, whatever it is. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of we talk about the streaming wars a lot on these shows, and um obviously I don't think I I won't go down to that tier, but I get why that might be enticing to some people if you don't care about commercials interrupting your shows, to save yourself almost $15 a month if you want the 4K tier, or almost $10 a month for the normal tier. But it is capped at 720p as well, which is bizarre. No one really has 720p TVs anymore, so just to kind of, I guess that's a bandwidth thing. You might as well save some money on bandwidth, I guess, for Netflix. But I don't know. What do you think about the you don't I'm sure you have no interest in a commercial tier either.
No, well, especially if you're watching something you actually are invested in, right? Like if you're watching Glass Onion at home and you're really kind of engrossed by the plot and the story, and then halfway through, all of a sudden you have a commercial break for
Midnight
L'Oreal's Midnight
Cream.
Cream. It kind of throws you off a little bit. Like if it's something that you're kind of like casually watching and you're throwing it on
The
in the
Mole. I was watching
background,
The Mole or something. Like,
that's
sure.
fine. Like, like reality TV or something that's just kind of very
Reruns of The Office or
yeah,
whatever.
background television, like, yeah, whatever. But if you are watching something that you have, like it is something like if I was watching Andor's The Eye and that pops up halfway through or at a moment where it's like, I'm sure like they're strategically and they place them at moments where
That's what I'm most curious about, of like
yeah.
when they place them, and like, will filmmakers start to go, I don't want my movie
Yeah,
to just
Marty
randomly have,
Scorsese's like, you watch The Irishman and the L'Oreal Midnight Cream ad
you
came
saw
on? Come on.
400 times because that movie's already 3 hours long or 4 hours long or whatever. Anyways, I don't
Wait, Anne
know.
Hathaway's not in my movie. You saw a Bakari ad?
Yeah, I don't know, dude. It's not for me, but I understand why they're doing it. But I'd be curious to see how it's executed, right? Like, and it
Yeah.
seems like all that's. It's funny. We're just it's like it's a vicious circle, right? Like
You're watching
it's
Luke,
just
I am
becoming,
your L'Oreal Midnight
yeah. It's
Cream.
just like it's just a full circle. Like we got to streaming, which was like, oh great, there's no commercials in streaming, and we can pay money to eliminate commercials. Oh, we've maxed out on subscribers. Oh, you have to subscribe to so many streaming services that it ends up costing more than cable. Oh, you want it to be cheaper? Well, you can watch commercials. It's just like it's wild. And I don't know. It's just it's all the same as it was on cable TV. It's like, will they build commercial breaks into their shows now so it'll be more seamless? But then if you have no commercials, it'll just go to black and then come back up, or is it just going to randomly pop up in the middle of a sentence, like you're saying, right? So, because I feel like that's jarring. You hope the technology is smart enough that they'll pop up. YouTube's gotten pretty good. Like it knows when it cuts, right? Like it cuts to a new scene or it cuts to a new segment, especially on Rhett and Link. And I don't know if
Yes.
they manually put in where their commercial breaks are going to be, or if YouTube's technology knows where it, when an edit comes in, like, or when a cut comes in and it knows to insert a commercial there, or like when a scene ends or something like that. You hope that in the Netflix or Disney Plus or HBO Max technology, they know, like, are they going to have a team that's going to be the people inserting the commercials properly, or is it just going to be like a free for all? Like this could pop up mid sentence. So I don't know. We'll see. Weird way to end it, but we're going to end it there, everyone. So I'm starving and exhausted by the end of this, but I had a great day of recording with Eric, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was much like that Black Adam day, to bring everything full circle. Exhausted, but felt like I had a good time.
Yes.
Um, Thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. Go check out that Black Adam spoiler-free review, which should be up or will be up very, very soon for you guys. We also have reviews up for Tar, Rosalind, Amsterdam, Werewolf by Night, Don't Worry, Darling, all of our TIFF reviews. There's a podcast about the Super Mario Brothers trailer, The Last of Us, our TIFF wrap up. So go check out our previous episodes there. One-stop shop for everything. Just head over to Untitled_movies. We have a Halloween Kills review up right now, which is really awesome. So go check that out for the spooky season. Did I already mention One Stop Shop, which is Letterboxd Untitled_movies? Did I just repeat myself, or did I? Or no,
It doesn't
I don't know.
matter. Let them know again, Matt. Let
Go
them
to
know if they go
Letterboxd and
to
then
iTunes and write us a review and say that
yeah,
we're great and
please do
5
that too.
stars
Yeah,
and
that would be
all
great.
that.
And then follow me. And I didn't even talk about being blocked by Seth Rogen's dog on Twitter. That
Now
was a
that's
big
the way to end the
that was a
show.
big moment that happened to me. So if you want to follow me and then possibly block me in the future, go to @Matt Rohrbeck on Twitter and all of those other social medias.
Yes, and if you want to see more of my video reviews, go over to rogerstv.com/cinemascene. I have a couple of interviews coming up with the director of The Good Nurse, Tobias Lindholm, and After Sun writer-director Charlotte Wells. So I hope people will give those a look, because I really do feel that I did an okay job with those.
Nice.
This is me giving myself a compliment, and I'm not great at it.
I'll watch them.
And then you can follow me on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Do you think Seth Rogen's dog uses L'Oreal's Midnight Cream?
Why block? That's the weirdest thing. I just went, I don't need to follow a dog on Twitter. I didn't do anything. I literally just went unfollow. And I know the
Well,
dog
you did enough, Matt.
the dog was following me, but I'm like, the dog's not gonna I'm not gonna lose a follower over this, right? And I lost even more. It blocked me. It blocked me. Anyways, bye everyone.